welcome everyone. We have with us Miriam and Miriam, do you have a last name?
Hall.
Miriam Hall and Melissa Moore from Karuna Training. Welcome you too. Why don't you tell everybody what is Karuna Training? Melissa, I know you're the founder, how you got it started, Miriam, how you got involved, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, briefly, I'm the co-founder. I started this in Germany, and several psychologists approached me who were familiar with the work that was happening at Europa University and wanted me to participate in teaching them more contemplative psychology, but not from the perspective of training therapists, but just bringing the contemplative meditative approach into their therapeutic work. So that's where we started with a 3-year training, and I invited other teachers in. Karuna's been through a million, that was 1995, so it's been through millions of different iterations now, but basically we offer a contemplative approach using Buddhist psychology. And first of all, working on ourselves to regulate and stay present through meditation and deep Buddhist training. But one doesn't have to be a Buddhist to do this, but it helps to know this language around mind and heart. And then we work with our cohort in community, and then we take our work into the world because we're very dedicated to the social transformation as well as the personal transformation. So we're trying to work very hard on that. And so I've been doing this for let's see, a long time now, 35 years, but I'm pretty much a beginner. I still feel like a beginner in this because this is pretty much based on realization, So we practice together and send a lot of loving kindness to our fumbles and our mistakes and are trying to really work together to find very powerful ways to bring Karuna methods to social action right now. And that seems more important than ever in this moment. So, Miriam, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, Miriam, tell us about how you got involved and anything you would want to add about Karuna and what it means to you. And I love your art, by the way.
Well, thank you. My mother painted this when she was in high school, and my mother died when I was 19. And all of her paintings got left in a box in the attic. And at one point I came to have the box, and this was after I am on lead faculty for Karuna Training, and I also run a business called Her Spiral Arts. And I named my business 20 some years ago. And at some point in my late 20s, I found this box of my mother's paintings, and I pulled this out and was like, okay, this is getting framed.
Very interesting. Wow.
Yeah. And then when we moved, my spouse and I just moved into a new house a few months ago, and we said, this is going to go in my office. Yeah. And I think also what's powerful about it is, for me, it's missing one color, but it has the colors of what are called the Buddha families, which are one of the key teachings in Karuna Training, about working with the elements and a lot of transmutation of energy and emotions and confusion into liberation and wisdom. So through somatic practices. So it also has resonance there for me. It was made by my mom. So I came to Karuna Training. Melissa and I were originally from the same lineage, practiced in the same lineage, which is Shambhala. And I became aware of the Buddha family teachings through some folks who offered programs. And I was really drawn to them. I felt very drawn to them. I also was teaching a Dharma art program. I became a teacher in an art program where they were working with the families. And I asked someone, how can I go deeper with this? And this was about 11 years ago. And the person said, well, you can either go to Europa University, where you can do a master's and you can go deep into the families, or you can take Karuna Training. And I said, okay, well, what's Karuna Training? And described kind of what Melissa just described. And I said, great, where is it? And they said, Europe. And I live in Wisconsin. And I was like, that's not going to happen. And then one of those auspicious, meta moments, meta in all the meaning of that term, I checked Facebook one day, and a teacher and fellow colleague of ours posted that the first Karuna training was coming up in California, in North America. So I attended the program, and because I tend to be like this, if I really love something, I want to spend more time with it, I want to learn deeply, then I usually wind up facilitating or teaching it if that's appropriate. So I fast-tracked my way into faculty.
Miriam has a lot of power, just naturally, and we just discovered that on the very first weekend, how important it was that we work together in a certain kind of way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what Melissa said too, because a lot of the faculty work is a continuous program. You know, we always tell the participants when we do Karuna training programs, like, we're in this too. We're going through our own training now, our parallel training, where we're using all the practices and working with all the same energy that the participants are, just at a different, not at a different level. It doesn't mean it's better or above, but in a different way.
I think one of the hardest things about training in Karuna is that we're training people to operate from a relationship of equals. That is very hard to do because of our conditioning, right? We're constantly, even in a therapeutic role, right? We're the ones holding the space. So we really try and break that down by doing practices that kind of look like you're holding people in a therapeutic construct, but it's not that, because we talk about mutual recovery, that the exchange that's happening is mutually beneficial, and that can be true in every relationship. So we're teaching people this to communicate through their hearts and with equality. And that is very useful, as you can imagine, in a social justice context. This is primary, and learning how to do that when there's difference. And I think even now, worldwide, we really have to find ways to address our differences and our different paradigms that we're holding. Obviously, we're living in parallel universes here.
Yeah. So tell us how the methods of Karuna training support engaged social action work.
I'm going to let Miriam answer that first, just because fun.
Yeah, it's powerful to just last night we had a faculty meeting where one of our colleagues was presenting an article about the appropriation of mindfulness, conspiracy of mindfulness being used by neoliberal and capitalist powers to basically make us better widgets and workers. Yeah, so just a moment to feel that, like, whew. So certainly that has been, I won't speak for Melissa, but I have a feeling there were some parallel experiences for her too, like our experiences in certain lineages and teachers. It's happened that way. And so it takes a lot. It's a long journey, and we're still on it, and we'll be on it for a while. And how to not use mindfulness, awareness, and transformative practices in a way to just perpetuate the status quo, which is really fucked up. And pretty hard to not do when you're in it. So there's a quality of continuously working and reworking with how we do this. And I want to name that, because also primarily our faculty is white and white women. And so there's also that aspect of it, right? Continuously learning and working through our own programming, our compliance with patriarchy and racism. So yeah, that's some of the inner work behind it too. One of the things that the kind of view of Karuna training when it comes to this kind of work is twofold. I think the first is that we do see that there's an essential component of inner work that has to happen. We don't do the inner work, then when we show up to do any purportedly outer work, right, work with others and social change, we, as one of my teachers, Lama Rod Owen, says, if we don't do our own work, we become work for other people.
Yep.
So there's that, right? There's that for sure. And that's valid. That's powerful in its own right. I also think when we were having this conversation about the mindfulness conspiracy article last night, I said, I also feel like there's a sneak attack thing that we do, which is like a loving sneak attack, which is to say that people are drawn often to mindfulness programs because they are following the rhetoric of self-improvement. I want to feel better. I want to be happier. And those things are not wrong. Those aren't bad motivations. And they're also motivations that won't get you very far and won't actually create real happiness, won't actually help us find the causes of suffering, and certainly doesn't connect us to the mutual liberation that's needed. So another way to look at it is, if we can actually have folks come in by that motivation, but then find as they go along that actually that happens collectively, simultaneously. It's not either or, which is the tricky bit, right? We often think about, is it one or is it the other? So there's both. Yes, we need to clean up our own messes internally and externally, and also we need to do it together. So that's a lot of the way that we do it, is by building community and building practice so that people can actually feel and find in their bodies what it's like to be in a collective space that's empowered. And that's what I really hear from a lot of grads and experience myself and a lot of other my colleagues and graduates, is this quality of, sometimes it comes out as, there's no place like Karuna. So how am I going to find other people like it? And then we say, you build it.
You build it.
You'll build it now.
Yeah.
We're very non-proprietary with our methods. So the graduate training is actually, once you've gone through the basic, which is morphing into different things now, we're putting it in 2 phases now. But the graduate is all about taking our methods into the world and doing a project in the community. So we really want people to apply this in their own way. It's like planting seeds, and then it kind of disseminates out in people's own style. We're not proprietary. The only thing that we don't share out in the world, people can use their understanding of the 5 Buddha families, which is really learning to work with the invisible forces of the world, the elements and the energies of our emotions and all the things we can't see that we're dominated by mentally and physically, and we're conditioned also to respond to these things. So how do we reclaim the kind of magic relationship that is almost indigenous in all of us, but much harder to claim in white bodies? And how do we come back to an understanding of this interdependence and inseparability with the world? That's what we're really bringing up, people's natural compassion, because that's where we all live innately from this view. And it's hard to hold it because, we have this view that everyone has basic sanity. And that's really hard to prove sometimes, but within the cohort, like, it's amazing because I always tell people the first night habitually, because I've been doing this a long time, I always say, look around the room. Every relationship you've ever had is present in the room because you're in the room. Basically, you have already made up your mind who you like and who you don't like. And you have no idea who's sitting here and everybody is your teacher in this room. And so we spend the time in the cohort. People think we're kidding, but we're not kidding, because we do a lot of work together. So.
Thank you. And I know, you kind of alluded to most of your faculty is white. A lot of Western Buddhism
Is white, yeah.
Is white, right?
Definitely.
And how have you been? It sounds like you're aware of that, and you understand some of the consequences. What have you done in response?
Yeah, can I say something about that, Melissa? Yeah. I remember, so my original cohort, which started about 10 years ago when I was a participant, the group was about, I said, started as about a quarter people of color and the rest were white folks. And like a lot of environments that are predominantly white led, slowly but surely, a fair number of the BIPOC sort of left and a few stayed. And one of the things that I was really struck by was the first cohort that I was on faculty for, every participant appeared to be white. One person was actually didn't identify as white, but what was white passing. And the first question in the room, because it was the first question I always bring up, was like, how are we going to do this other level of work? And it was a really important reminder that white folks can do work together too. Like, it definitely, we can, and actually we have to do some of that work together. And the fact is that, again, still the more white folks you have kind of at certain levels of power, which we know are inherently there, even though we try to do our best to all be working together as equals, the more challenging the environment is going to be for BIPOC, for people, the global majority. So we have one core faculty member who's Japanese American, and we have been really focusing a lot of energy and efforts. That colleague and I have, Naoko and I have been really focusing our energy on bringing up next generation of people, global majority, as faculty. And so the answer is slowly but surely, and with a lot of awareness and a lot of humility, because you really, there certainly can be the tendency, we've had it, we've all had it as individuals and as an organization, to actually sort of push, or it seems like encouraging, but actually pushing a BIPOC person into a position when we're not actually ready to support them, or they don't have enough training, or they don't have enough protection and support that they need from other BIPOC and from us. So it's been a humbling experience for sure, and is definitely I don't want to say it's a goal, but we understand it's a necessity.
Yeah.
So no other way to move forward.
I mean, we currently have, let's see, now we have 2 other BIPOC folks working for us. And it's been such a journey for me, because I'm conditioned, been teaching this for a very long time, and aspire to make this migration with a more diverse community. Therefore, you need diverse teachers, and they need to be held and not put in a position, as Miriam said, too soon. So I'm still in a position, because one of the things that's true is Karuna teachers don't grow on trees, because it's a development of awareness. It's a development of kind of awakening a certain inner wisdom that we have, that has to do with your relationship to space. And so that takes so much time. And so I'm in this awkward position of also trying to provide a support, but I'm in a mentoring role always with the faculty. And it's just been, trying to create methods that allow for voice on all levels, all kinds of naming. It's very humbling. I get a lot of feedback about, just what I don't see and what I don't know, right? And it's been like, this is Miriam, and my entire relationship has been this.
Okay, so I've been sitting here thinking, don't be a consultant, don't give them advice, don't be a consultant. And so this was not in the original questions, but I'm going to bring this up. So there's this whole issue of getting feedback, taking feedback, especially white people getting feedback on our racism. And there was, this whole book, White Fragility, all about how bad most of us are, almost all of us are at taking feedback. There's another phenomenon. So I developed a little workshop called Being with Defensiveness, about increasing our tolerance of the experience of all the experiences that come up when we get feedback, right? So I'm curious, this is a great place. How do you draw on your training?
That's great.
That's it. That's it. So that's
take the feedback and not become the problem for the other people.
bingo.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you say more, but I think our entire work is based around intensity capacity, around any intolerable feeling that comes up, any emotion, and we all have them. We can call them beautiful monsters, in the words of Sokni Rinpoche, that arise constantly because of our conditioning, right? And some of that is defensiveness, or we want everything to be nice, we want people to like us, all that stuff. We all have it. If we're in a body, we have it. So that intensity capacity to sit in dialogue and get feedback is built into the curriculum. We call it shining the jewel, because in the midst of those defensivenesses, usually our greatest weakness also is tied to our greatest strength. There's a parallel thing going on there. And so we can learn to navigate and learn to give feedback in such a way that also can be received very easily. We really work on that very much. Miriam, what do you have to add? I mean,
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful description. And I think um, for the so again for this cohort where Naoko and I were participants together, and in our grad program we did our project for taking things out in the world was to work with the organization we were both involved with, and Naoko worked in a mixed race group and I worked in an all white group, applying our methods for Karuna training specifically to working on racism. And then we worked on a group together that combined those folks. And one of the things that we found when we came back and presented our findings was that we had been in a program with some people for 3 years, and that there was a fair amount of white fragility. I'm not pointing fingers, like I had it too, and that if we don't apply the methods specifically to these issues,
That's
we
right.
will use the method, we will bypass them. We will just go right past, And so we have to actually name what's in the room. And so Karuna has gone through a lot around ableism as well.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
had a really great, faculty member who's really like continuously gives us the feedback that we need around that and around race in specific. So those are kind of been our two specific areas that we've actually continuously called attention, because if we don't name them in the space, if we don't continuously receive that feedback and work with it, it will get bypassed, and that will cause harm. Like bypass sounds, sort of like not a real problem. It's just a way you go around a city, but actually it's a very harmful thing. And it's very common in spiritual communities to do a kind of like, we're all one, let's just not worry about this. So staying in that grittiness, I think when Melissa was talking about our relationship with space, can we actually stay with that intensity? Can we stay with it and both not take it personally and also take responsibility?
And be open. It's like accountable.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, it's a really long journey, and there's so much. Oh, it's hard. It's hard.
There's so much pain, and as a majority group, we are insulated from the pain most of the time, and so
Yes.
when it hits us, it's like, oh, all of that. Oh,
Oh, that's a taste of what it's like. All the
Right. Yeah.
yes, and sometimes it comes in a
dump. Yeah.
dump. Yeah, I mean, a concentrated dose because somebody's been holding something back for a long time.
Right.
Yeah. It's so true.
Well,
Oh,
and it's also historic, so another teacher I've worked with, Resma Menikam, from my grandmother's hands, talks about all of that energy, anything coming, and this is actually very fits with the Karuna view as well, that the energy that comes forward, say if a Black woman is calling me to task, it's coming from that person's rage. It's also coming from their ancestors. It's coming from at least 500 years of a relationship between whiteness and Blackness on this continent. And so it's going to come with a lot of energy. And so building our intensity capacity is not just about like a friend or someone gives me feedback. It's actually being able to handle the blow, especially when I've been trained to not handle it, to bypass not having to deal with it. And how do we actually work with, as Melissa said, these kind of unseen elements and powers and magic? How can we work with that, not in a woo-woo vague way, but in a very specific way to ground ourselves in that, so that we can transform and transmute that incredibly, I mean, confusion again is an understatement, right? Brutality of our bypassing the whiteness, in order to really work with that in a way that helps everyone come through.
I'll mention briefly that we're venturing into, with one teacher, some ancestor work, which widens the mind. It's a movement, kind of very non-linear movement work to use a visualization that's created by this woman, Luchi Lopez, who's from originally Morocco, but she lives in Spain now, and she's multicultural, very amazing woman. And she uses music and just guides you into these conversations with your ancestors if you're willing to go there. And sometimes you are, and sometimes you're not. That's information. And it's so profound because the mind is so much wider. And this is one thing that Western Buddhism has done, is it shrunk the capacity of mind's potential from the original text of Buddhism. Buddhism is such an understanding of the wideness and capacity of realization we all hold, which doesn't even belong to the Buddhists, frankly. It's not ism at all. It's a human potential. but because it's gone through our whitewashed capitalist channels, we've shrunk down capacity and we've blocked the indigenous wisdom that we all have access to. And so we have to find creative methods to enter into that. And it's really hard because I have a PhD, I have linearly trained myself, to understand the world, right? And so you have to start undoing all of that. So that's very profound training that we're just embarking on now. Maybe you'll join us sometime.
I'm definitely interested in introductions to all your teachers. And we've got a few minutes left, so there's 2 questions I always ask at the end. One is, what would you tell people about finding their purpose? If somebody like knows they have a purpose and wants to make a difference in the world, but they're not clear on what that's going to be.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm actually thinking of something that Karuna, mainly through Melissa, but also some of us have been able to attend talks and experiences with a native and Buddhist teacher named Eduardo Duran, wrote the Buddha in Red Face and other wonderful texts. And I remember he quoted someone else as saying, even if you don't know who your ancestors know who you are. And that just stopped me. I was listening to this while I was on a walk, and I was like, stop me in my tracks. Like, both a feeling of relief, like, okay, phew, they know who I am, they'll find me. And also like, yikes, they know who I am. That means so that's what, just as soon as you asked that, I've heard you ask that question before on listening to the recordings, but as soon as you asked that, that's what came up, was like, maybe that's also how purpose can be, is that it's less, not to say that we don't need to find it, but less that we need to find it and more trusting that it will find us.
It will find us. And honestly, everybody who's ever said that they found their purpose, that's how it happened.
Right.
Like a feral cat, right? It walks in.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are things to do to leave the door open.
Oh my
Right.
goodness.
Anything you want to add, Melissa, about that?
No, it's just so true. Like, even I was like the least likely student at Naropa Institute to ever run something like Karuna training. I fought the whole thing all tooth and nail. And then of course I get myself back 100 times through students along the way. It's just been an amazing journey of humility, frankly. So I'm really glad to meet you, Alice. Thank you for inviting us into this conversation.
Yeah. One more question. Are you offering people a free gift?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's a book that will tell you about contemplative psychology that we've spent some time on, that will really educate you, that's easy to read and very short. Can read it in less than 20 minutes, and it kind of gives you a whole overview if you're interested in this work. It kind of says where are the roots from, and what are we drawing from, and what are we doing. So
great. And what is it called?
What is it called?
I can look it up.
It's called Contemplative Psychology, or Basics of Contemplative Psychology, something like that. We wrote it about a year ago, so there's 1,000 other projects going on right now. So
okay, you don't have to tell us why you don't know the name.
I'm sorry.
So glad to spend some time with you both. It's really wonderful, and thank you for the work you're contributing to the world.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. Thank you for putting a network together. That's really impressive.
It's really powerful. It's been, yeah. And it also too, I just really want to name, like, the work that we're doing it comes through us. It doesn't come from us, right? And it comes from many, many thousands of years of practicing Buddhism, especially Vajrayana and Tibetan Buddhism. So there's so much there for us to work on restoring credit and relationship with those lineages too.
Thank you.
Thank you
for that reminder, and thank you for thank you for opening the door when it came to you. Take care.
Thank you.